Hello and welcome back to the channel. So, power creep is definitely probably the biggest topic of discussion when it comes to, the combat of the game at least. And while I do think that some people do think it is a worse problem than it actually is, I've seen people say that characters like Firefly or Boothill are unplayable, which I think is just not true at all. Like, you can make most of the 2.x characters work just fine. Are they as good as the new characters? No, but that does not mean that they are bad. However, I do still think that they do kind of feel in a very kind of spot. And I do think that if we keep kind of going down this path where, the new characters do more and more damage, and the enemies will just get more and more HP, and it will just be even harder for the older characters to keep up. And eventually it'll just feel like you can only use the new characters to beat the content. Now, I don't think we are quite at that level yet, but it is kind of starting to feel like that because of just the huge difference between a lot of the older characters and the new one. So what can be done to kind of alleviate the problem, since power creep is never going to truly go away, since the characters being strong, does get a lot more hype, and let's be honest, gets a lot more money. But I do think there are things that can be done to kind of make it not feel as bad. The main one, I think, being we need a lot more buffs. Since, one, we don't even know if we are going to get more buffs after 3.4. Unless there are leaks on that, but I don't want to know about them, because they didn't announce it in the 3.4 livestream. And if they don't announce it in the 3.5 livestream, I don't know if we are going to get more buffs, and that's going to be kind of disappointing. Unless they're just going to not pre-announce them, and they're just going to announce them when they do them, which maybe I could see that more. But even then, the current pace is just way too slow, because by the time they buffed 4 characters, we already got 5 new really broken characters. And since the launch of the patch, besides maybe Silverwolf, I have barely seen anyone talk about the buffs. Now, don't get me wrong, the buffs definitely did help those characters, but I think them taking so long to do the buffs and announcing it beforehand did kind of hurt them. I think it would have been better if they had just done the buffs when they announced it, instead of doing it 2 patches later. And there are a lot of characters in the game that need buffs, because even back then they were kind of questionable. Someone like Arlen has been the worst character since the game came out, and a buff could at least make him somewhat decent. I hope that they don't just do buffs for the limited 5 stars, since I do think that the standard characters and the 4 stars could use it more. The only exception will maybe be Sealy, obviously. She's been power gripped so hard. And maybe Imbabiter Lune are real limited 5 stars I could see using the buffs. Maybe Ratio as well, since barely anyone talks about him now ever since the 2.0 patch just came out. But I do think a lot of the standard characters and things like that need it more, especially characters like, Yanqing. The second thing that I do think they need to do is one that basically everyone has been complaining about for so long, which is add more 4 stars. I say this in almost every single video, but the fact that we haven't gotten a 4 star since 2.5 is insane. And it's not like they were bad. Most of the 2.x 4 stars we got were good. Hunt, March, and Moze were good on, Fate Shout teams. And Gallagher is still one of the best sustain options. We even got Remembrance MC, who technically, I guess, isn't a 4 star. But they are still a really good free option. But, we still haven't gotten an actual 4 star. So, we know that they can do it. They just aren't. And I know the argument from a lot of people would be, oh, they're just doing it because just making 5 stars does make them more money. And yeah, I'm sure money is probably a factor. But I do also think it's because the devs want a lot of the more 3.x characters to feel more important and exciting. And also, when characters are 4 stars, a lot of people complain that they are a 4 star. I saw so many people complaining about Gallagher and Moze being a 4 star. So they probably saw that, we're okay, people just don't want 4 stars. Which I do think is why all of the Chrysosairs have been 5 stars, since they are meant to be these, godlike, important characters. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't make 4 stars feel important to the story. They have literally done this with Gallagher and Misha being very important to Penacony's story. But if the devs really don't want to make 4 stars for some reason, there are 2 other things. Either make more alternate forms for more than just March and MC, since it'll still kind of fill the role of 4 stars, since it gives people more sort of budget or free options, and will also give life to older characters who most people don't really use. People like Gwenithan or Luca or Hulk or something. Especially maybe some of the supports like Asta or something, since as someone who has lost on almost every single support banner, making a team without a lot of the newer like premium supports feels really bad. And it does also feel like they're kind of designing a lot of the content around needing those supports, or give us more currency so it is easier for people to get the newer 5 stars, so it feels like they can actually, beat the content relatively, not easily, but at least have a chance at actually beating the content. So, mainly more events, because only having 2 events in the same phase in 3.4 is insane. I still can't believe that, but, or, just do all of these options at the same time. Like, Hoyo's a big company, I'm sure they could do it. Now, the last thing that I do think would help is fixing the endgame modes. Mainly MOC, since I feel like just doing the buffs would help Pure Fiction and Apocalypse Shadow enough. Though I do think Apoc could use a bit more touching up, because it does feel a bit bland right now. It's kind of just, you just fight the boss, and that's it. There's not that much more to it besides just wanting to break them. But MOC is just really outdated and fundamentally flawed, mainly just because of how the buffs work. And the HP, which I'll get to in a second. The buffs are just way too favored towards the on-banner characters. Now, obviously, basically all of these games do that. But, right now, if you don't have the characters to be able to interact with the buffs, it just feels really bad to play. Now, obviously, you can beat it with older characters that can't interact with the buffs. But that doesn't change the fact that it just kind of feels like shit. And that is the main problem. That is that the mode's just not fun to play. That's just what it is. I do think that the 3 buff system for the other modes is just way better for a lot of reasons. 1, it gives people a lot more options, and 2, it's just way more interesting. So you could do it where you have 1 buff for the new character and 2 for to other archetypes, because not every character needs to be good like at one time, but it should at least feel like there's more than one good option. Now, also on the discussion of the health, which I do think is kind of getting pretty obnoxious at this point. Like, obviously they shouldn't just have, no health where you can just kill them in, 2 seconds. But right now I think that we're kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, where it kind of just feels like you're just hitting a brick wall until it dies, which is just kind of boring. Especially since the only things that have really changed for MOC is just, what buff is in it and what enemies are in it. The actual, system mechanics of MOC haven't really changed at all since it came out. And I really do think it needs a rework with what Pure Fiction got, because Pure Fiction is way more enjoyable now than it was before after it got a rework. And on top of that, some of the bosses in MOC are just really annoying to fight, especially the ones like Hule that just attack a million times. Because it's not like you can't beat them, it's that sometimes there are just times where it just feels like there's just nothing you can do, which I think is a problem with a lot of the bosses, is that it's not like they're actually that hard to fight, it's that sometimes you're just put into situations where it just feels like you just can't do anything. At the end of the day, while I don't think the power creep is as big of a problem as some people think it is still a problem in the game, definitely, and they do need to start focusing a lot more on the gameplay side of the game as well as the story, since I do think the bigger scope of Euphoria has kind of made them neglect the gameplay side of it a bit, and it is making it stagnate a bit as a result, which I do think is why a lot of people are kind of getting annoyed, and just most people mainly just talk about the story now. People don't really talk about the gameplay. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.